Well, welcome. I'm Joel Grimes. I have been, for the last 10 years, a Canon Explorer of Light photographer. It's a great badge of honor. I've worn it very proudly. But I have sort of some news to pass on. I am no longer a Canon Explorer of Light. And so there's a few people, I say few, there's a number of people who have been asking what's going on, why, what happened. Well, I want to pass that on to you, but I also want to make this video as an encouragement to you. Part of my whole thing as an educator, and if you'd call me someone who's an influencer in the industry, I always want to encourage and to pass on knowledge that I've had and built up over the years to others. And so I love that. To me, if I can't encourage someone, then I'm not doing my job correctly. And so we're going to talk a little bit about goals, setting goals. And I am now 67 years old. My birthday was this last week. And so as with you get older, if some of you that are getting into your 50s, 60s, you start thinking about things like, I only have so many summers left, or, the window of opportunity for me to do things is starting to shorten. When I was 35 or even in my 40s, I never even thought about that. And so when my contract came up in the end of August, I had been thinking about what do I want to do over the next, say, 10 years, if I have 10 years left on this earth. And so I started thinking about a lot of things, which is doing my own personal photography work. Now, I've been a commercial advertising photographer for 45 years, and I've had to work very hard at making a living and providing for a family. And along the way, I have done a number of personal projects. I've always sort of emphasized that in my career and for others to do your personal work. I was listening to an interview last night with Albert Watson, one of my, I would say, living hero photographers. I've looked up to his work for many years, and they were asking him what any regrets. He said, I wish I had done more personal projects. And I think that as you get older, you start to think about that. And so one of the things that's on my mind is to do personal projects. I would call them what I could say fine art work, or work that I want to hang on the walls, maybe get into galleries and whatever. And so that's on my mind. So I start thinking about projects that I could do. Let me start by going down this path a little bit and saying that the last 10 years with Canon has been absolutely amazing. I have been very blessed to be a Canon Explorer of Light, but they have put me in a new category, which is called the Canon Legends. And that's for the old guys, gals, that move on from the Canon Explorer to the, I guess, it's a Canon Legend category. And so I'm still somewhat connected to Canon on that part, and I will have hopefully some access to, like I said, the print people and whatever. I think Canon Legends has a nice little ring. As you get older, maybe that's kind of something that's important to look back and say, I have had a career. And when I was young, I used to look up to the older photographers, and now I'm in that category. So it's kind of a weird thing to think. There was a sign or a little meme yesterday or 2 days ago that said, I thought it would take longer to get this old. And it goes very fast. So a 10-year block of time goes very, very quickly. And so I'm looking at the next 10 years. So being a part of Canon was a great blessing, and I have nothing but respect for Canon and the people that work at Canon. And I still have my Canons. I'm going to be very, very happy to continue using those. So why would I step down as a explorer? Well, let me back up and say, first of all, and this is part of my encouragement to those of you that are maybe out there, you're in your early part of a career, or maybe you're in that position where you're starting to teach and be an influencer, and you say, man, I would love to be a Canon Explorer of Light, or maybe you use another brand of camera and you'd love to be an influencer tied to that brand. Well, one of the things that I teach all the time is in my marketing is the power of 8. And that is that I put my name into the brain of the person that makes a decision to either hire photography or whatever. I put together a business plan to get my name into the brain of that person that makes that decision. And so my son, I have four boys, but two that are into photography. One's a filmmaker, one's a car photographer in LA. But my son Ben, who's the car photographer, said, well, Dad, if this is before I was Explorer of Light. He said, why don't you apply your power of 8 to become a Canon Explorer of Light? And this is my encouragement to you, is that I put together a plan to do that. I said, okay, I'll take the challenge. And so I began to find out, number one, who's the person that makes that decision. And Canon is, and I think a lot of the camera companies are like this. They come to you, you don't come to them kind of attitude, right? So if you keep saying, hey, I'm available to be a Canon Explorer of Light, they usually, they kind of frown on that. So I had to tread lightly, but what I had to do is get my name into the brain of that person. And so whenever I would see that person, the first time I met that person, I went up, introduced myself and said, hey, I'm Joel Grimes. I'm one of the speakers here at this, whatever it was, WPPI or Photo Plus. And I just want to introduce myself. I use Canon, whatever. And then the next time I see that person, I go up to them and I'd send an email and say, hey, I'm at this big event and I'm not sure if you're going to be there, but if you are, I'd love to talk to you and have a chance to just say hello. So it was never about trying to be in a Canon Explorer of Light. It was all just about putting my name in their brain. And so I was down to what my son would say, what number are you on? I said, well, I'm on number 7. I had 1 left. And so I was invited to speak at Photoshop World at the Adobe, the kickoff, and it's in front of about 5,000 people. And this story is really interesting because I was asked to be, so Adobe takes 5 minutes out of their 20 minutes, and they take a featured artist and they put them on stage and they talk about their work and what they do and how Adobe is a part of their workflow. And so I was asked to do that, and it was like, are you kidding me? What a great honor. And so I was told, though, you can't just ad-lib, and I'm very good at ad-libbing. Well, I wouldn't say I'm very good, but I'm much better at ad-libbing than taking say a script and having to read. And I'm dyslexic to the point where if I'm in front of a crowd and I have to read something, now if I something I've read like my keynotes and whatever, I don't have a problem. But if it's something new or something that I really have to read, like a long sentence, the world kind of spins. The page starts to spin. I don't know if anyone's dyslexic, but that's how it works. And it's just the way my brain works. It's just part of who I am. And there's a lot of benefits to be dyslexic, and a lot of that is because I do workarounds. So anyways, they asked me and said, you have to read from an iPad. You can't just go off script and just talk. You have to read a script. And when I got that email, I said to my wife, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that in front of 5,000 people. And my son, I think we were maybe talking or whatever, and he said, well, that would be and there's a Canon people going to be there. I said, yeah. And he said, that would be your number 8, your 8th time to get in front of Canon. And I thought about that and I said, yeah, okay. So I accepted the challenge. And the night before we did a rehearsal, I was fumbling through. It was like a nightmare. And then here I am getting to go on stage, the countdown, the smoke and the lights and everything was going. And then I'm like holding my iPad, and I looked out in the front row and there were all the Canon people, the executives and everyone. And I went, this is my chance. And so I got on stage and I did I made one mistake, but I did a really good job. And 2 weeks later, I got a call to be a Canon Explorer of Light. So here's my encouragement to you, and that is when you want to look and seek after something, you have a goal, you want to work for National Geographic or whatever it is, you say, I have a goal, I want to do that, I want to be in galleries, I want to work for ad agencies. You have to go and put yourself out of a comfort zone and put together a game plan, and I call it the Power of 8, where you go and say, okay, I'm going to make a concentrated effort to put my name in the brain of that person who has to make a decision, and good things will follow. And so I became a Canon Explorer of Light, not because I was the best photographer around, but because I did my due diligence in getting my name in the brain of the right person. So with that, I had a great 10 years with Canon. And so why, again, let's go back to why would I step down with Canon? I've had a number of sponsorships and ties to products. Westcott Lighting and one of their pro, photographers, and I have a great relationship with them. I love their stuff, and they have a system, and I love because I get to talk to them all the time. They'll say, Joel, what are you missing? What do you need? And I'll say, I need this thing that does this, and they're like, okay, and then 6 months later, there it is. And so it's a great opportunity to be a part of a a company that's got a product that's in my industry and that I can have a voice in. And of course, I have the Joel Grimes beauty dish that I helped design, and it's got my name on it. So what a great honor to be a part of being tied in with companies. But there is a price to pay with every type of sponsorship or when you're tied to a company, because you have to watch everything you say and make sure that you don't fumble and say something that company comes back to you and says, we don't really like what you said. And there have been a couple Canon Explorer Light over the years that I've been in the last 10 years that have made a mistake and they were let go because of something that, you and I would probably say, well, that wasn't that bad. But when a company has a brand that they have to keep, they are very conscious about everything you say, everything I post. And so there's a burden there that you have to watch. And I don't mind that burden. It's just that burden is there and it's always there. And with Canon, I have to make sure that I do, according to the contract that I have, a number of things. And so after 10 years of doing that, it starts to be a little bit of a burden where you think, oh man, I got to make sure I, post this or do this and social media. And so as I get older, there was I can't remember if it was an actor, it was somebody that was very famous that had a quote that said, what's the most important goal in your life as you get older? And they said, to free me up from my commitments, because we all have commitments. When you have all these things that take your time, that suck your time, as you get older, you start to think about, you know what? Maybe it's time to let go of this, let go of that, and open the door for this opportunity. Now, one of the things I've been wanting to do is to get back to shooting my 4x5 camera. And here it is right here. I don't know if you can see that in my frame. I did for 10 years in the 90s, I shot this camera in about, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 countries, a number of huge ad campaigns that really launched me on a national, if not international level. I started doing Type 55 Polaroids. I'll show you a few here. And I was able to come up with this focusing technique that I developed that would guarantee that I would have a perfect sharp focus on the eye on every picture that I did. I shot, I think, over 7,000 sheets during that Type 55. I processed them all myself. And it was a time period in my, I think, growth and history in my photography that was really kind of like a golden age. And now I love digital, absolutely love digital. And digital gives me some options I could never do with analog or with a film camera. However, one of the things that a camera like that does is it slows you down. It's a lot of work. It's a pain. You make very easily you make a mistake and you come back with nothing. And so it's a challenge, and it's also kind of an adventure, an experience that I kind of miss. And do a series of cowboys, maybe with the 4x5. And so with that, I've been holding off on doing that because of my commitment with Canon. I also wanted to step into dabbling. My son has a medium format digital camera, and I wanted to maybe test that out and do some things, and also try out some lenses that are kind of old vintage lenses you can mount on your camera and do some really weird things. And I just commit with Canon, it really kind of hindered me to go and experiment. And I'm going to tell you a funny story. Back when I was in Denver, I had a studio that was right next to an audio-visual company. And so I would go out and throw trash into the dumpster, and I'd look in there, and they were always throwing old stuff away that they no longer used. And I was pulling out of the dumpster these big projector lenses, and I would take those lenses and I would take the shutter part of the modern lenses, and I would take and I would mount these lenses with duct tape, black duct tape, and I would test them, and I would shoot 4x5 portraits. And before the Lens Baby, I was doing this out of getting stuff out of the dumpsters. And I was always experimenting with funky things, doing stuff. What would that happen? What could I do that? And I kind of missed that time where I could just play and ask a question and go out and try it. And so that's another reason why I think that it was time for me to step down as an Explorer of Light and to be able to go and just test some lenses. And there's some really cool stuff going on, and I I see that going on in the marketplace on YouTube videos and stuff, and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. So that was part of the reasoning of me going into this new mode of my life, a new chapter of my life, to go and just experiment and do stuff and not have a burden that I had to maintain. And so 2 encouragements that I want to leave with you is, number 1 is that you have a goal. It's possible for you to reach that. And I've done that in my whole life. And when I do my 10 steps of how to become a successful photographer, the very last one is set a sight on a goal that you think is impossible to achieve, and then go and chase it. And it's possible that you can reach that goal, even if you fall short. So you don't go to the moon, but you maybe go to the space station. It's one of those things that I think is important to set goals. And sometimes I set them naively, meaning that people around me go, "Are you really?" And I remember when I was before I was Explorer of Light, I mentioned to someone, "Hey, I'd love to be a Canon Explorer of Light." "Oh yeah, right. We all would. All of us Canon shooters would love that. Good luck." And so I achieved that. And I remember before I did my coffee table book on the Navajo Indians, I had a studio mate, and I mentioned, "Hey, I want to do a coffee table book sometime." And he said the exact words. He said, "Yeah, good luck with that. That's a pipe dream." And so that kind of upset me, and I purposely chased it, and I got a coffee table book. So it's possible that you can achieve a goal that maybe you think is out of your reach. And the second thing is set aside time to do your personal work, because when you get my age, the window of opportunity starts to shorten.